Hey guys, Jay Wilson from Onyx Reporting. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm super excited to walk you through a Python scripting use case. Now, I know not all of us are Python scripters, but I think this is really relevant because a lot of us are dealing with the question of Domo governance. And for those of us who have had Domo for 4 months to a year, maybe 2 years, you're probably trying to wade through this soup, this thick, murky soup of Domo datasets, cards, dashboards that were set up as a proof of concept. Maybe they were deleted, maybe they weren't. And the more users you have working in Domo, the bigger the mess becomes and the harder it is to add some governance at scale. And today we're going to take a look at a use case where we're using Python to automate that cleanup process. But where I get super excited is not only am I implementing this in Python, but I'm going to go ahead and implement this in Domo's Jupyter workspaces. One of the features that was announced at Domopalooza 22 this year was the scheduling feature. The idea that I could run this script on a schedule on the first Monday of every month or whatever, and just automate a lot of this manual governance process that we've previously had to do by hand. Now, spoiler alert, at DP22, they also talked about a workflow feature that would allow you to kind of set up rules and create workflows that automate stuff in Domo too. But that beta isn't here yet, and Domo Jupyter Workspaces are. So let's take a look. In terms of automation, right, we're going to break it down into a couple steps. First thing I have to do is handle my credentials. I have to get a session token that's going to allow me to authenticate against the Domo APIs. I'm going to have to be able to get the stuff that I want to work with. I'm going to have to apply the rules for data cleansing, and then I have to update Domo again. So let's see how quickly we can get through those steps. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not going to save my username and password in clear text on the screen. Instead, I'm going to use a workflow that's borrowed from JavaScript, a .env file that will allow me to store my username and password in a separate file and kind of just read them in. Technically, that's kind of superfluous because Domo Jupyter Notebooks cannot be shared yet. I'm sure that's a feature that they're working on expanding, but at the moment, theoretically, I'm the only one who can access this notebook, so it doesn't matter if I have my username and password stored in clear text, but let's adopt best practices as early as we can. We're going to also need to use the requests library, so I'll install that. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the tutorial. Like I said, my credentials are stored in this env.txt file, which you can just create, right-click, create a new file. Easy enough. To read those in, we're going to use a .env library, load.env, and that's going to load the variable, load these parameters into os.environ, which is another library that we have to import. So we're going to get Domo username, instance, and password from the environment and store them as variables. I'm going to return those variables from this function. As a test, I'm going to run my getCredentials function, and then I'm going to print the username that was returned. Let's go ahead and run that guy. Success. And just to prove out the idea, no, Jay, you're not going to print your password. Let's print out the instance. Okay, so we can see that we printed Domo Dojo. Success. All right. The next thing we need to do is we need to take my credentials and exchange them for a session token. I've covered this on my channel before, but we're going to hit this API with a post. With a post request. Now, in the body of the post request, we're going to pass my username and password. Now, as far as I know, I do have to pass my password in clear text, but as I say that out loud, that can't be true. That just does not seem like it should be true. So if anybody knows if I can do like base64 encoding or whatever as a secure way of sending my password, let me know and I'll update the video. In any event, so I'm creating a dictionary that has these values which I'll call my body. I'm using the requests library to send a request. Here's my post, pass in the URL and the body, and take that response and convert it into a JSON object, or dictionary, really. The dictionary does come back with a whole bunch of other stuff, but really the only thing that I want to keep is the session token, so that's what I'm going to return. Again, to run my test, I'll run the getFullAuth function, pass in the parameters, and get and then print my session token. So as I run that, we can see I got my session token. Good stuff. Now that I have my session token, I can authenticate against any of the, not any, but I can authenticate against the APIs that I need to use in order to get stuff done. So what I want to do is I want to get all data sets that don't meet my naming convention standard. In order to do that, I've set up some dummy data sets in Domo Dojo. They're all, they were prefixed rpt_domo stats, and they should be called gov_stats, v34 or whatever. So how do I get these data sets? Well, I need to search the data center. And what you can do, a lot of times you can just inspect your page, go to the network tab, refresh your browser here, and you'll be able to see all of the API requests that the browser is sending. Now, I happen to know that I'm looking for the search. Yeah, the search API. I can see here we're doing a post request. I can see here's the payload. I think this is the right payload, both because the response looks like something that I'm interested in, but also the payload has that filter. Now, this is how you get started if you don't have any resources or any documentation at all to help you kind of get started working around with automation in with the Domo APIs. But one of the tools that I've been working on, or projects that I've been working on, is a Postman collection of pretty much all of the APIs that I've ever hit in part of this an automation task. And so that has been querying the data center. I've also done stuff where I'd had to get a data set by ID or retrieve the data lineage from Domo. So if you're interested in this resource, hit me up, let me know, and we'll talk about it. In any event, now that I know the URL that I need to hit, now that I know the payload that I need to pass in a post request, I can go ahead and get started putting together my function. So I'm going to write a function called getAllDatasets. I know I need a session token. I need that instance. In this case, I'm going to add the search name as a parameter so that I could search for other stuff as well. For the body, I'm pretty much going to just copy paste the body that I saw over in Chrome, and then I just parameterize the query for the search name. I'm going to tell it to just return 10 results, but if you want to lift this number to 100 or build some sort of a loop that loops over the paginated response, that might make sense. Again, this is the URL that I'm going to hit. And this is the part, oh my gosh, it literally took me 6 months to get a straight answer back. Once you have your session token, if you want to hit these undocumented APIs, you just have to add Domo authentication as a header into your request. That's also covered in my most recent Postman video. If you want to take a look at that, I'll give you some more details. I'll include a link below. In any case, we're going to use the requests library to send a post request with that URL, with that body, with this header. I'll get a response. I'll convert that response into a JSON object. From there, I'm going to keep search results map, and specifically, I want to keep the data set. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. Again, here in Postman, but also in Chrome, you'll be able to see here is the response back from this API. I don't care about the facet map. I don't care about the sort. I only care about the search results map, in particular the dataset key, because that gives me the list of all of my data sets. How do I know it's the right one? Well, because I recognize this database ID, but actually more likely I just recognize, hey, here's the name of a data set. That's the thing that I'm interested in keeping, the name of the data set. So again, coming back to my function, go grab the search results map, grab the dataset key. That's going to be my list of data sets. To test it, I'm going to run my getAllDatasets function. I'm going to pass in the necessary parameters, and hopefully it's going to give me a list of data sets. Yeah, let's run it, see what happens. So as I run it, I can see open square brackets that says it's a list. I can see here's the dataset ID, and there's the name of my dataset. Good stuff. It's a pretty long, like a whole bunch of stuff that I don't actually need or care about. I just care about the name and the dataset ID. So what's our next step? Our next step is to process the dataset, right? Process this pretty gnarly list that I got back. So to do that, what I'll say is, for each dataset in the list, get the name, get the database ID, and then I want to define the new name, which is going to be this. If you can read it, great. If you can't read it, ask Grant Smith in the Domo Dojo community how to do some regex. Because obviously what you want to name your dataset is going to differ for each dataset. So you'll probably have a couple scripts that you're running through. But anyway, just to make sure I'm not crazy, we're just going to print the results. Let me comment out this function here for a sec. And let's run our code. All right. So we took that list of data sets. Again, we did a for loop. And now we're just printing the ID, the old name, and the new name. So the old name was RPT domostats34. The new name, the new naming convention is govstats34. Great. So now I know what the new name should be. So now all I have to do is tell Domo, hey Domo, update the name of this dataset. Well, how do I know what API we're hitting? Again, as before, we're just going to monitor network traffic. So we're going to go back into the data center. I'm going to see what does it look like to rename a dataset. I'll go in here, edit the name, add something to the bottom. All right. Now, usually when you're updating a dataset, you can search for the dataset ID to find the API that we hit. So again, here I'm just kind of looking through. I'm eyeballing properties. Seems promising. Changing the data source name. Yep, very promising. Sending a put request, which means alter an object that already exists. Yeah, this is it. So I'm setting a put request to the properties API. I have this payload, and that's going to change the name of my dataset. Let's go back to Jupyter Notebook and write our final function. So I have my update dataset properties. I could have called it update dataset name, but properties matches the properties API. Again, I'm going to pass my instance, my session token, my dataset ID, and I'm going to pass in a new name. So my body is pretty much copy paste out of Chrome. We've got the same headers, xdomo authentication. We're sending our put request with that URL, that body, that header, and we're just going to return the JSON format of the response. All right. So coming back to my function where I process the data set, as I'm looping over each data set in my list, I want to update dataset properties, pass in the necessary parameters, and then just print the response. All right, moment of truth, guys. So as I run it, that's the ID, that's the new name, that's the old name. This is the URL that I hit to update the properties. That's coming from this print command up here. This is the response. The response is telling me that it has a new name, govstats34. Sweet. So it seems to have worked. So theoretically, if I go back to the data center, I should have 0 data sets called RPT, and I should have my data sets renamed govstats_. So now these data sets are following my naming convention. We're on the home stretch, guys. Let's close that loop. I've created a script that renames data sets to force them to meet my naming convention. I don't want to have to run this manually. I don't want to have to run this locally on my computer. I would like to schedule this script as a data flow to run once a day at 11 p.m. every Monday. Save. When I go into the data center, I can go to Dataflows now, and I can see, hey, I've got that I've got that data flow. It's a Jupyter Notebook data flow. And I can click the run button, and it will run, and it will hopefully run successfully. Now you can see I've had a couple failures, some gotchas that might trip you up. In one of the, I don't know if it's still the case, but you want to make sure that your Jupyter notebooks don't have a space in the title of the notebook and don't have a space in the job name. There was a bug. I think Domo worked to iron out that bug, but just to be on the safe side, don't include any spaces or special characters in either of those two things. Also, something that can trip you up is if you are kind of developing as you go along, you might remove the import statement for this library. And the function will run because you imported it already. But if I restart my kernel, basically run it from scratch, now it's going to fail. Don't make a liar out of me. Now it's going to fail because it says, hey, I don't know what OS is because you haven't imported it yet. So basically, in a nutshell, you want to run your kernel, restart your kernel, and run it all from scratch, and just make sure your script runs through before you schedule it. Otherwise, you'll end up like me and have a bunch of failed executions. Anyways, guys, I hope that was helpful. My name's Jay Wilson. If you like the Onyx Reporting channel, feel free to drop a like on the video. Feel free to subscribe. Take a look in the description. I'll link some other videos where I've talked about this content. In this season, I'm going to be spending a lot of time working on automation and scripting and Python and stuff like that. So if that's your jam, awesome. If that's not your jam, leave a comment. Let me know what kind of stuff you're interested in learning more about, and we'll bring that to the channel too. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good one.